How to talk to kids about tragic events. Traumatic events happen every day all over the world. These events can be difficult for anyone to handle, especially children. No matter the age of the child, you can find a way to ease any fears, worries, or discomfort by speaking to them in the right manner, picking a proper way to discuss the issue in relation to the needs of the child, and look for residual effects of the trauma. These things can help you learn to speak to a child about trauma. Part 1. Speaking to the child in the right manner. 1. Keep it simple. When you are talking to a child about a tragic event, try to keep it to just the basics. The child does not need to understand the exact details of the event, especially if it is gruesome or horrific in nature. Instead, limit the explanation of the event to something manageable and understandable to the child. As long as the child can understand what has actually happened, there is no need to tell them too much. For example, if a family member is in a horrible car crash that killed a number of other people, just tell the child that the family member was hurt in an accident. There is no need to tell them about all the deaths. 2. Ask the child questions. After a traumatic event, you may not know how the child is dealing. Ask the child how he or she is feeling. See if the child has any questions about the event or about his or her personal reaction to the event. You want to make sure the child knows you are there to answer any questions or address any concerns about the event. Ask the child at times he or she might be most likely to talk, such as before dinner or after playtime. 3. Avoid talking down to the child. Although you want to keep the information simple, you don't want to belittle the intelligence of the child. Even children as small as 4 can gather contextual clues about a tragic event. Instead of talking down to the child, give them enough information for the child to generally understand the situation so as to not cause confusion. For example, don't phrase your reply as if you are brushing the child's concerns off. Avoid saying a bad thing happened somewhere away from here, so it doesn't matter. Explain exactly what happened if the child is curious, but do so in a way the child can understand. 4. Discuss the reasons for the trauma. The child may be very curious as to why a traumatic event has occurred. If it is a natural disaster, explain to the child that these things happen from time to time because of weather or other natural reasons. If it was a traumatic event caused by human actions, explain that sometimes people do bad things but that it isn't all people. Never blame a cultural, racial, or ethnic group of people for a traumatic event. This will only teach the child to be wary, and possibly prejudiced, of that group of people. 5. Speak to the child face to face. When you approach the child to talk to them about the trauma, make sure you bend down to where you are level with the child. Trying to speak to the child indirectly or talking down to the child's level from your full height can make him or her feel as though you do not care. Instead, take a deep breath and talk to the child directly. Squat down, sit down, or pick the child up so you are face to face and can have an honest conversation where you look directly at each other. 6. Let the child express emotions. When you are discussing a traumatic event with a child, make sure you let the child express his or her feelings about the situation. You want to make sure that the child feels safe and secure enough to tell you about his or her feelings so that the child can process the event. Tell the child that it is okay to express emotions about the event and to not keep them inside. If the child has a hard time expressing feelings in words, try having the child draw, paint, sing, or write down his or her feelings. 7. Limit exposure to media coverage. If the tragic event is something that is locally or nationally publicized, try to avoid letting the child see any media coverage of the event. Televised and written news reports will often have graphic images and sound bites that may show the child more than necessary. This includes social media and online sources of news as well. If the child is older and may be able to handle the news, still be cautious. Record the new program or watch the online video ahead of time to make sure the contents are not too much for the child to handle. These events can include large accidents involving numerous people, natural disasters, and targeted attacks. 8. Do something proactive. If the child is deeply affected by the traumatic event, try to have something good come out of it. Help the child take a proactive approach by writing letters to those affected by the traumatic event or writing thank you letters to those who have helped with the trauma. Explain why these kinds of things are helpful and encourage the child to do them. You can also explain the heroic actions of the people involved, such as emergency services, everyday people who helped in the trauma, or volunteer organizations who have helped with the traumatic event. This will help the child see that good things can come out of bad events. 9. Allow the child to see your reaction. A traumatic event that affects a child may also affect you. Don't be afraid to let the child see you cry or show outward signs of sadness or grief. This will help the child understand and acknowledge his or her own pain. Although it is helpful to see your emotions, never let the child see you lash out in anger. Avoid screaming, kicking, or yelling around the child. The violence in this type of reaction can cause the child to be even more upset and scared by the event than before. Part 2. Considering special circumstances. 1. Talk to children 0-5 years of age. Each age group of children need particular types of care in everyday life, and talking to children about traumatic events is the same way. Despite being 5 years old and younger, preschool-aged children can be quite perceptive. When dealing with children of this group, make sure you reassure them with physical signs of support, such as hugging them, holding their hands, or picking them up. This shows outward signs of comfort that will make talking to them easier. Also verbally reassure children of this age group by telling them they are safe and that you will be there for them. Try to speak in a calm, reassuring voice, which will help them stay calm as well. Even small events can affect children of this age, such as power outages or loud storms. Make sure to reassure them that everything is going to be okay. 2. Discuss trauma with grade school children. Children in the pre-adolescent stage of life may understand much more about traumatic events than younger children. Depending on their age or level of maturity, these children may need different types of care. Try to give the level of care based on the specific child's needs. Younger school-aged children may require similar care to preschool children, but older children may have more questions or be exposed to more information at school. If the child is being exposed to more outside information about a traumatic event, try to calm their fears. You may even need to have a more in-depth, targeted conversation if the child is extremely concerned or curious about a particular event. Make sure that you reassure the child in any scenario to ensure the child feels safe and protected. 3. Talk with teens about trauma. Children in their early and late teens are already going through hard changes in their daily lives. Adding a traumatic event into the situation may be difficult for the teen to handle. Talk to teens with openness and honesty. They will likely understand more about the event and be exposed to multiple sides of the event. Make sure you let them know you are open to talk and listen to their concerns and fears. Teens may be reluctant to talk, so check in with them on occasion to keep the lines of communication open. 4. Discuss trauma with disabled children. Children with disabilities will need particular consideration in times of trauma. Despite your child's age, you should make sure you speak to their mental level. Your child's situation will vary depending on their personal needs. Just make sure you match your child's specific needs when discussing traumatic events with them. This may mean speaking at your child's developmental level, not the developmental of their peers. For autistic children, the necessary steps to talk and comfort the child will be different depending on the child's needs and history. Make sure you tailor your discussion to the child's needs and do what you can to comfort them. Encourage calming stims, and give them some extra time to relax. Part 3. Noticing residual effects. 1. Notice sleep problems. There are certain physical and emotional behaviors that may signal residual effects of the traumatic event. If the child's sleeping patterns change following the traumatic event, there may be something going on with the child. Difficulty falling or asleep, trouble waking up, and increased nightmares is a common effect of traumatic events on children of all ages. Returning to bed wetting at night may also be a side effect of traumatic events, especially for preschool or elementary-aged children. 2. Watch for a change in emotional state. Children may suffer a change in emotional state after a traumatic event in an attempt to cope with the event. Uncontrollable anger, depression, and sadness are common emotions shown after a traumatic event. Children may also become withdrawn or distant. Young children may also become extra clingy or needy during these times. Children of all ages may also undergo emotional and social regression, where they act and react more immature than their actual ages. 3. Keep an eye out for physical complaints. Some children will have a physical reaction to a trauma. This is because their emotional worries are pushed down or not dealt with, which then manifests itself as a physical reaction. These reactions include muscle aches, chronic headache, noticeable increase or decrease of appetite, extreme lethargy, generally feeling unwell. 4. Watch for substance abuse. Teens often react to traumatic events by trying to hide in alcohol, tobacco, or illegal substances. Directly following a trauma, keep a close eye on your teen or older adolescent to make sure your child has not turned to outside substances in order to cope with the traumatic event. If you are worried about this, talk with your child about it and let them know there are other, less harmful ways to cope. 5. Get help. All of these reactions are normal and should not cause alarm at first. However, if your child exhibits these symptoms for longer than 2 to 4 weeks, there might be cause for concern. If you are worried about the child's mental, talk to your pediatrician or a mental health professional. Keep a close watch on your child if your child has a history of trauma.